Greetings, family. Welcome to the Sister Shanice Show platform. We are live and direct, all the way from the UKKK. I'm absolutely delighted to be joining you again for another Sister Shanice Show program. I have a special guest from America who's got an absolutely amazing story to share with us. And so I'm so delighted that we have this wonderful guest in the house. So he's just backstage and he'll be coming front of house in a very short while. So I'm just going to grab the link, and I'd really love you to do that as well right now. Just grab the link to this show and share it, please, far and wide. Let me just post that link down here, and then I will be able to share it with those who might be interested in catching this live. Wow, family, what a strong it has been. We started our Black History program with Dr. Winters just on Monday, and it was amazing. It really was a great program. And to everybody that has joined the program to share the knowledge, we thank you so much. History is so important, so important, because if you don't know where you're coming from, how are you going to know where you're meant to be going in life? If you don't know of the great accomplishments of your ancestors, if you don't know, the range of skills that we had and therefore still have as a people, how are you going to know your full potential? And if you're not learning about your history in school, college, and university, how are you going to acquire the knowledge so that you can share it with your children and inspire them to be the great ones that they have the potential to be? You see, you're going to be locked out of all of that knowledge and information if you don't know your history. So whether you study your history through the training programs that people like myself and Dr. Clyde Winters put on, or whether you read the books, or whether you do your own personal research, whatever your journey is, please just make sure that you learn about your history, because we have an absolutely amazing history. We really do. And it's beautiful. It's so empowering, because once you know your history, oh my, all you want to do is just indulge more in it and then grow as a result of it. As you can see there, I've got my book, The Remarkable Accomplishments of Asian African Civilizations. Get your copy, family. It is absolutely beautiful. It really is. In that book, you will learn about some of the magnificent technological advancements and achievements that we have managed to, that we invented as a people. Let me just read just a little bit for you from my book. Okay, so if you get this book, it's going to take you on a journey through time, a journey through time of African greatness. And we're going to be revealing to you some of the rich and often overlooked history of African civilizations. And we're going to be stretching you from, to enjoy some of the ancient marvels right through to modern day ingenuity. Isn't that fantastic? So our mission in this book is absolutely clear. And the mission is just basically to showcase some of the remarkable contributions that we as Africans have actually made throughout history to civilization. Because, there are those who try to peddle the myth that we haven't accomplished anything as a people, when in fact, we are the founders of civilization. We are the founders of so many great cities, so many great nations, so many great countries. And if you get the book, you'll read about some of these, undeniably magnificent achievements, and it'll make you feel proud. So get on this journey and embark with me on this journey of discovery. Okay, there's some wonderful pictures and images in there as well that have been created using AI. And so you'll enjoy the way we've managed to bring to life, some of the ancient African civilizations, and some of the industries, some of the people, what they may have looked like. So you're going to see that in there. And you'll come away with a greater degree of knowledge of thousands of years of our history. You'll come away with the knowledge of our legacy, our scientific marvels, our groundbreaking achievements, all testimony and testament to the awe-inspiring capabilities of us as African innovators. So don't you think your children should be reading about this? And, what we do in this book, family, is we challenge the preconceived notions that they peddle out there, and we bring the evidence of our early civilizations and our great sciences, medicines, mathematics. Yes, we were the inventors of all of that and much, much more. Now, I know many, if not all of you who are regular viewers to this channel will know all of that. But maybe your family members may not know. Maybe some of the young people in particular in your family may not be aware of the fact that, we are the inventors of so many sciences, medicines, mathematics, and so much more. It's all in the book, okay? So woven throughout the pages of this book is a wonderful tapestry of African societies, African glory, our technological prowess, and the legacy that we've left behind that defies the constraints of time. And so we know that our greatness was actually interrupted, by the invasions and the enslavement and the tragedy that basically altered our trajectory that we was on as African people. But, the hundreds of thousands of years of our history will leave you, that I talk about in this book, will leave you with no doubt, nevertheless, of the greatness of us as a people. And you'll realize that despite the extent to which we suffered as a people as a result of our colonization and enslavement, the resilience through it all, the strength of our people, the unyielding spirit of our people, the sacrifices that they made, despite the adversity, will make you still coming away from that era feeling really, really proud. So get the book, rediscover your roots, rediscover your brilliance, remember who you are, remember your former greatness, and let's celebrate, the legacy that our ancestors have left behind on the continent for us to marvel in. It's at the heart of who we are. Greatness is at the heart of who we are. And that is what you're going to come away with after reading this book. And so I welcome you and I challenge you to get a copy of this book. Black History Month is coming up now here in the UK. They have Black History Month in February in America, but in the UK, our Black History Month is October. So get a copy of the book for all the young people. And as you can see, family, we have our beloved brother, Makheru, in the house. And so he's just getting ready to come to you live and direct. As soon as he takes himself off mute, we will welcome, you will hear his voice. So family, as you come through the door, please do let us know that you're in the house. Leave a comment, leave a big up, give us a hi, tell us where in the world you're viewing us from. Welcome, welcome, Brother Makheru. How are you?
Oh, every day's a blessing, Sister Shanice. I certainly appreciate the invitation, to come onto your show. You've had my fellow comrade from African Liberation Media, Brother Amos Keprakara, on the show, and I know on a regular basis you have the infamous irritated genie Ayo Kamathi on your show. So I'm glad to be invited to participate in your program.
It's an honor. Thank you so, so much for accepting the invitation. Let me just ask you if we can see a bit more of you and less above the ceiling. If you just tilt your phone or your desktop slightly so we can see a little bit more of you. And that would be great. So just tilt it. Yes. Oh, brilliant. Absolutely okay. Fantastic. Oh, thank you. So family, you would have heard from the names that have been mentioned there that you are in good company today. Our brothers coming to us all the way from the United States of America. My beloved brother, you were born in North Carolina. Tell us a little bit about what's North Carolina like?
Well, I was born in North Carolina during the era of what I call, and some other historians call, American Apartheid. Some people call it Jim Crow segregation. And so I grew up experiencing a lot of things that people, see in history when they are looking at the history of America. Uh, a group of one particular group that had power absolutely controlled everything we did in terms of where we lived, where we went to school, where we could eat, what buses we could ride, and it was a total system of control. The water fountains and sitting on the back of the bus and those types of things were all part of my experience. But I grew up in a very nurturing, Black community because our families were largely intact at that time. So it was a very nurturing community. Every adult in the neighborhood had the same authority as your parents in terms of being able to discipline you, to give you wise instructions and advice. And there were always these grandmothers that sat on the porch looking out to make sure that we weren't doing things. And I attended for my entire uh, uh, elementary and secondary education. I attended quote unquote segregated schools, but quite frankly, I wouldn't change that because of the benefits that I got from not just the education. I mean, obviously we suffered from savage inequalities in terms of physical plants and all of the science labs and other things. But I would not change that because I thought the benefits for me, with every teacher being like a surrogate parent, I thought the benefits outweighed any of the negatives. And when I got in the movement, the Black Liberation Movement, I had the pleasure of honor of being in contact and getting to know a lot of people who were probably on average about 10 years older than I. They had been as part in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And so I would ask them, you are now out here advocating, Black power and Black liberation. What was the thought process in terms of segregation, desegregation, integration? And their position was we were challenging a system of control. We wanted to remove a system that told us where we could go, what we could do, what we couldn't do. And then once we removed that, then would have the capacity to make our own choices. Dr. Martin Luther King once described freedom as the capacity to make choices. And so, given the conditions, I would have been a person who would not have chosen, the desegregation route, at least in terms of, something that I, inspired to do. At the same time, I knew that people didn't have any right to tell me where I could go, what I could do, what my, uh, you know, uh, possibilities were in terms of, education, careers, and those types of things. So, that's what it was like. I mean, we didn't have a whole lot. I mean, a lot of, I would say, the violence of things that a lot of communities suffered. I guess you could call it invisible violence. We did have four bombings. I think it was in 1964 when, people were challenging the system of American apartheid through just, passive resistance, sitting in a restaurant and those guys, just passive resistance. And the response, is violence. That's basically the way they know how to respond. I have a saying that says, for the white supremacy, dynamic retaliatory violence is therapeutic. When people they believe are inferior do things that they shouldn't be able to do, then it creates psychological trauma, and the healing process for their psychological trauma is retaliatory violence. And this is a different subject, but I can see the United States heading in that direction as we approach this election in November of 2024.
Wow. So those were the days, and to some extent, and now we're kind of living in a legacy of those days. And it's interesting that you said you went to a segregated school and that you wouldn't change it, because here we are today, integrated, and our children, it's as though they've been integrated into what Martin Luther King was saying towards the end of his days, into a burning house. And our children are burning and are suffering in these miseducation systems, these schooling systems that they call schooling systems.
Yes.
And yeah, so you experience the apartheid system of America straight off firsthand. And you also, in your opening remarks there, talked about the Black liberation movement that you got involved in. And I know you said that in your bio as a teenager that you joined the Black Panther Party. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to hearing all about that. But before we go into that, we just want to welcome the audience and check that we're coming through the airways clearly. So family in the house, please let us know that you're there. Let me go over to my phone and just check to make sure that we are indeed coming out live and direct. Yes, I can see us there on YouTube. Yeah, let us know you're in the house. Drop some messages in the chat, okay? I can see we've got some messages in the chat already. Absolutely fantastic. Let me know. We've got Sister Betty in the house. Rise up, Hotep family. S.A. Smith is in the house. Oh, she's saying, thank you for covering the African American story. So we've got an African American sister in the house, and I'm sure there's more. Oh, we've got Mondele in the house. Yenge and Pimpa Kiambote. Sister Shanice and brother is Makheru. That should be there. So he's saying that he's in the chat, and this is the Congo leopard in the UKKK. Rise up, Congo leopard, who's in the UKKK. Rise up, London Smith. Rise up, brother Simeon, and rise up, each and every one of you. Yeah, drop your message in the chat so we can give you a shout out. We are ready to go into the meat of the conversation today, because our brother can't stay with us for the entire 2 hours of the show. So we want to get to learn as much as we can from our brother about the apartheid system, about the Black liberation movement in America, and what has been happening since. So, let's go straight into it. My brother, you became involved in the Black liberation movement, and in particular as a teenager, you joined the Black Panther Party. Tell us about, those days, those years when you were part of the Black Panther Party, please.
Okay, well, let me kind of set it up in terms of how I arrived at that point. My father was a veteran of World War II. He was in the United States Army, and then he switched to the Air Corps. The United States didn't have an Air Force at that time. They had the Army Air Corps. And he served in 5 campaigns, beginning in what was then French Morocco, going to Sicily, and then to Italy. And so based on his experience, he was always a person that was keenly aware of things that were going on in the world. Mm-hmm. And in my home, my parents, we had at that time 2 newspapers, a morning news and evening news. Initially, I grew up in a home with no television, and we finally got a television. And when we did, I wasn't interested in a lot of the things they had on there. But it was a ritual that we would watch the news. And in the process of watching the news, growing up in the 1950s, the first thing I remember is the attempt to desegregate Little Rock High School in Arkansas. And then, of course, the sit-ins, the freedom rides. I was sitting in elementary school when the March on Washington occurred. We had these televisions. They let us watch the march, and so I was aware of what was going on, and I wanted to be part of it. But we really didn't have that level. Most of the activities that were taking place, the desegregation activities, were taking place by college students at Johnson C. Smith University primarily. And although my mother was a card-carrying member of the NACP, she was not really very active. But there was an awareness of what was going on. And so when I would see things like, bull counters, police dogs, uh, firemen in Birmingham rolling little black girls down the street with their fire hoses with, hundreds of pounds of pressure. And then, of course, there was the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. What was it? Just 18 days after the March on Washington, with the killing of the four young sisters and two young men. And a lot of times, the two young brothers, Virgil Ware and Johnny Robinson, get forgotten, but the white supremacy dynamic actually killed 6 black children on that fateful day in September of 1963. So I wanted to be part of it, but my father's family were like a family of hunters. My father had served in the war. My first cousin was in the United States Air Force at the time. These were not people that were just going to turn the other cheek, so to speak. Now I understand the strategy. I understand the strategy, and when I talked to Kwame Ture and Baba Mikasa, Willie Ricks, and Cleve Sellers, Faye Bellamy, and a lot of others who were in SNCC, they said we had to adopt that strategy at the time. And I guess if I had been of age, I would have adopted the strategy also. But when I heard Kwame Ture, then known as Stokely Carmichael, issued a call for Black Power in 1966, I said, aha, that's what I want to be part of. That's what I want to be part of. And 2 years later, a student at John C. Smith spent the summer in Oakland and asked them if he could start a chapter, and they gave us like a preliminary or provisional chapter to get started. And so in the fall of 1968, I joined the party. The party in Charlotte lasted less than a year because of some various activities that were taking place. Some of it was repression, some of it was part of some people being undisciplined. And so when I enrolled in school at Morehouse in the fall of 1969, the reason I wanted to go to school in Atlanta was because I knew that's where the headquarters of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was. What I didn't know was that SNCC was on his deathbed at the time. But luckily for me, there were SNCC activists still hanging out, particularly in the Atlanta University Center. And I became, friends with associates, or I should say students of people like Baba Mikasa, Willie Ricks, who was on the Black Power March, helped conceive the idea of Black Power. And so I shifted into what was then the developing Pan-African aspect of the Black uh, liberation movement. So there was in Atlanta in the fall of 1970, still hanging on to my teenage years, I attended the Congress of African Peoples, the first Congress of African Peoples. And, this was a tremendous historic event. And there were a lot of interesting things about that, but the one thing that I remember the most about it, I mean, I remembered a lot of the speeches, seeing Queen Mother Moore, for example, in person. I mean, that was, like, I didn't know who she was, but I know everywhere she went, she had these flowing robes on, and there was a crowd of people behind her. I said, she must be important. So, I found out about her and her, joining the Garvey movement, the UNIA, when she was a teenager. But I got to meet at the first CAP a lot of brothers and sisters who were representatives of the armed liberation struggles that were taking place in Southern Africa, of course, also in Guinea-Bissau under Amilcar Cabral, but I don't remember PAIGC had a representative there. But so I met and became, friends with particularly a brother that was a representative of Joshua Nkomo. Nkomo was ZANU, right? Oh, yeah, ZANU, I think, because Mugabe was ZAPU, I believe. The Zimbabwe African National Union and the Zimbabwe African People's Union or Patriotic Union. I can't remember the name now. But that was one thing that confused us. I mean, particularly a young activist like me, is like, for example, South Africa, the ANC, the PAC, and I mean, in Namibia, SWAPO and SWANU. Angola may have been the worst. We had the MPLA, UNITA, what was Holden Roberto's organization name, FNLA. So I'm like, why? Everybody's fighting the same enemy. Why? And of course, I just didn't have the knowledge, the history to understand. But on our campus, there was a brother from Detroit. There was a member of an organization called the Pan-Africanist Congress USA. And I joined that. And so we started studying the history of Africa. Primarily we bought Kwame Nkrumah's books, Towards Colonial Freedom, Africa Must Unite. And we started studying the books, and that gave me a better understanding of what what the struggle was. And so at a later point, I had moved on to the Malcolm X Liberation University, and at the second Congress of African Peoples, this would have been in 1972 in San Diego. Had the pleasure of hearing CLR James speak there at that particular conference. I was chosen to represent the students at X, and so I actually spoke at that conference. So we were really deep into what we consider to be the African liberation movement, Pan-Africanism, and the leader of the organization, Malcolm X Liberation University, attended a education conference in Dar es Salaam. This would have been in the summer, I think, of 1971. And while he was in Dar, he met some people, members of Frelimo, the Mozambique Liberation Front. And they invited him to come inside of the liberated areas of Mozambique. Now, we know the history. The Mwalimu Julius Nyerere was allowing, the Frelimo to use Tanzania as a base of operations to attack the Portuguese who were still trying to hang on to their colony in Mozambique. And so our brother Owusu Sadoki went inside the liberated zone, saw the liberation schools, saw the medical clinics, saw the farming cooperatives, all of the things that African people were doing, freed from the yoke of colonialism. And so he asked the Frelimo representative, said, "What can we do to aid your cause?" And they said, "The main thing you could do is make our people in the West, in the diaspora, aware that this armed struggle is going on, because our people, in the United States, Canada, and the Caribbean largely don't know about this." Now, obviously a lot of people did, Walter Rodney and Maurice Bishop and all those kind of people obviously knew that kinds of things were going on, but a lot of people didn't. So he returned from liberated Mozambique, the liberated areas of Mozambique. This was mostly the northern areas of Mozambique and Dar, and said, "We're going to organize an African Liberation Day." Now, this is coming out of the OAU, the Worldwide Day of African Solidarity, established there when the OAU was founded, and they established May 25th as the date for it to be celebrated. So the date closest to that for us in that next May. Now, this is in the fall of 1971. So we had basically the whole school year to kind of work on this in addition to doing our studies. So in May of 1972, May 27, 1972, after 9 months of organizing, we had this massive demonstration. We called it "Breaking the Chains of Oppression Through Black Unity." That was the title for the march. And actually, we had in North America and the Caribbean, we had demonstrations. The largest demonstrations was in Washington, D.C. That's where I was. We had about 35, 40,000, maybe more. They'll never give you an accurate count. You have to do your own estimates. 35, 40,000, perhaps more. We also had a demonstration in Toronto. There was one in San Francisco. Some people have seen the clip of Walter Rodney speaking at the ALD in San Francisco in May of 72. And then we had two in the Caribbean. I think one was on Dominica, and I think the other was on Antigua, if my memory serves. So this was a really high point in terms of the Black liberation movement or the African liberation movement, and I was honored to be part of it and to participate in it.
Wow, phenomenal. Oh, wow. And clearly, back then in America, there seemed to have been, a greater amount of solidarity around African liberation. And there was so much activism. You named so many great activists there while you were speaking, who we've just read about and learnt about through what we've read. And here you are, someone who, was actually working alongside and learning from and organizing with. And alongside some of these greats, CLR James, as
Yeah.
well, phenomenal character in Black British history in terms of his role as well with Garvey and Kwame Nkrumah, spreading the message of Garveyism in the early days of Ghana, phenomenal. And then to organize an event where you get 30 to 40,000 of our people to turn up, those were powerful days. That movement, was phenomenal, wasn't it? And
Yeah, it was. We
of Malcolm X as well, kind of ringing out loud during those days as well, didn't you?
yeah, well, when I was really as a a young adolescent at that time, I remember I remember exactly what I was doing when the flash came across the screen that Malcolm X had been assassinated. But, I wasn't connected at that point. I mean, it'd be interesting that a few years later I would be attending Malcolm X Liberation University, but I wasn't connected. But the people who trained me, who educated me, who raised my consciousness, Kwame Ture and Baba McCarson, Faye Bellamy, Cleve Sellers, and all those people who trained me, they were connected. They clearly followed Malcolm, when he left the Nation of Islam, was forced out really, and began his travels to Africa, and uh, all of the information he brought back, the speeches, he gave. I would, eventually, come across these tapes or albums and listen to him saying that you can't understand what's going on in Mississippi if you don't understand what's going on in the Congo. This is the DRC, 1964, where Maurice Chambé was just acting a fool. Uh, Malcolm called him the worst Negro ever. I think is how he described Chambé. And so Malcolm was making those kinds of connections. Now, I mean, I've become thoroughly ingrained in the history of Malcolm since, and in my opinion, in the 1964 1965 timeframe, Omowale Malcolm X, as we call him, uh, was the most important, most significant person of African descent on the planet. Now, people might look at that and say, well, what about Kwame Nkrumah and Ahmed Sekou Touré and Modibo Keita and Julius Nyerere and Kenneth Kaunda? Malcolm was the person with the most potential to make Marcus Garvey's vision of Africa a reality. And of course, he was hand in hand with all of those people I just named. He associated with those people. He talked to Kwame Nkrumah in Accra, and he spoke at what was then the OAU. And so the people who were educating me about Africa, they were deep into what Omowale was saying in 1964 and 1965. And so, I just happened to be the beneficiary of a person, who was sitting at their footsteps and listening to them, explain, why this connection to the African continent was so important, because we have to liberate African people globally. We have some of these insane people running around here in the United States, isolationists talking about, they're descendants of slaves. What a horrible way to describe yourself. Anyway, I mean, I'm a descendant of the originators of civilization. I'm a descendant of Sundiata Keita and Yah Santawa and the Manarinas. I mean, we we were engaged at that point, and I thought moving really towards a global African liberation movement. That was my perspective, based on my knowledge as a person in his early 20s.
Wow, a phenomenal movement it was during those times, and to, have lived during those days and to gain that experience and to have been, educated by those greats, it's such a grounding to have. And, a grounding that a lot of our young people don't have today at all. And so as you were growing up in that movement during that time, what happened after Malcolm X was assassinated? What happened to the movement? How did it impact the organizations that you were a part of? How did it affect the kind of coalition and the aspirations that people had? I mean, because obviously over time we are where we are now, but it'd be interesting to get a sense of how it all began to disintegrate. But so Malcolm X was taken out. What was the impact of that across those movements at the time? Can you remember?
Well, I really, the only thing the only thing that I can say about that is, what I was told by the people who were in SNCC. Okay, so this is February of 1965. The people who were in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee had become radicalized over the years. Now, these people who were talking about Black Power, like Kwame Ture and Barbara McCosker, Willie Ricks, Ruby Doris Robinson, Dory Ladner. These people were talking about Black Power in 1966, started off doing sit-ins and freedom rides. That's a long way from Black Power when you think about it. But what happened is their experience, the utter brutality, the brutal reaction of the white supremacy dynamic in Mississippi and Alabama, Georgia and Florida, Tennessee, other places, it radicalized them. And so they got the Civil Rights Act passed. At the same time the Civil Rights Act was passed, they were discovering that 3 civil rights workers, 2 of whom happened to be people of European descent, and one brother, James Earl Chaney, had been, murdered by the Ku Klux Klan in Mississippi. And so they were being radicalized, and they knew that there had to be something beyond these laws, because after all, these laws were already on the books. Okay, these laws had been put on the books during Reconstruction. There were a group of justice-oriented white men, primarily. There were some white women also, like Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, which a lot of people have no understanding of what of who the fictional Uncle Tom that Beecher Stowe, described. But they attempted through various laws, amendments to the Constitution and other laws, to move the United States towards a multiracial democracy. And the United States really had an opportunity in the late 1860s, 1870s to move in that direction. But the people who lost the Civil War won the aftermath. They started calling themselves redeemers. They were saying, they said that, we are launching a white redemption campaign because we lost the war, and we lost the Civil War. We are going to redeem ourselves. And as the wheels of politics in America are constantly churning, you had a presidential election that was deadlocked in 1876. They cut a deal to give the Republicans the presidency if they agreed to remove the troops and the people who have been protecting Black people as they tried to make democracy a reality in South Carolina and Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana. The troops were protecting people as they, registered to vote, began to vote, to do various other things in terms of economic development. When those troops were removed, the Redeemers, the White Redemption Campaign, unleashed a volley of violence. And we had just numerous incidents of racial massacres of Black people who were just trying to make America a democracy or live in a quote unquote a democracy. Of course, the United States is not a democracy, it's a republic, and really it's not even that, it's more of an empire now. But you had a just immediately after the Civil War, you had a mass racial violence in Memphis, Tennessee, 1866, Colfax, Louisiana in 1873, Clinton, Mississippi. I mean, just all across, even up until even into 1898 here in Wilmington, North Carolina. They literally overthrew the government. The white supremacy dynamic overthrew the government. They had what was called a fusion government. It was a combination of Black and white Republicans, and they overthrew the government. So Kwame Ture and company realized that these laws had been on the books and they had been overturned or not enforced. And so they said, the only way we'll ever achieve anything is through power. Okay. And so, that's what launched that particular campaign. It was the awareness of history. And the other thing, of course, they knew is that being a, quote, numerical, minority here in the United States, they knew that we had to have a global reality. We had to have a global connections to African people, in the Caribbean, on the continent, because, we're trying to restore our people to our traditional greatness, free, proud, productive, prosperous, and powerful people.
Wow, those days must have been absolutely awful. And, as you say, it's so important that we remember our history and what our people went through during those times. There's a terminology that Americans use a lot that we've turned on the head here because we say words is powerful. So we don't call them white supremacists because they're not more supreme than we are. We call them, white terrorists, white extremists. We dash where that white supremacist kind of label that they revel in. You don't give them the pleasure of that. So you decide.
When we are using that word, we're not using it in the sense that people are superior or that they are supreme or anything like that. What happened initially, I mean, for years we used the term racism, and then people started saying, well, anybody can be a racist. You can have white racists, you can have Black racists. And so, they started talking about reverse discrimination during the era when they were engaged in different types of projects to try to become more involved in the mainstream of the American empire. And so a lot of us use the term white supremacy because, as Dr. Francis Cress Welsing said, there's only one functional form of racism, and that's white supremacy. And it's functional because it operates through institutions. And so that's why we use it. But, it's, hey, look, I can understand why people wouldn't would not want to use it, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's a
White
convenient way
extreme,
for us to describe certain things.
yeah, yeah. White extremism, I think, does that so well as well, especially when you think about the brutality, that you've shared with us that our people experienced at a time when they were just trying to vote, when they were just trying to exercise, their democratic rights. And so, the organizations then got to the point where they decided, look, we needed to have power. If we were going to, be in a position where we could improve the conditions for us as a people, we needed to have positions of power. And from the outside looking in, America seemed to have then moved to a place where they managed to elect a lot of people of color into very powerful positions. But what do you have to say about that? We have our views, but it'd be interesting to hear, from the perspective of the Black liberation, is someone who's fought so hard to get Black people into positions of power, to get to a place now where, you saw over the decades after the movements and the brutality and all of the massacres and everything else, now Black people starting to integrate and be put into positions of power. What how did that impact the movement for liberation and empowerment, when there seemed to be a move now to integrate people into their institutions and systems of power?
Yeah. So in the paper I sent you, we were talking about, how, what happened in the post-colonial period, and one of the things that I wrote about there was neocolonialism, replacing white faces with Black faces in high places, essentially holding office without holding the power to positively impact the conditions of the people they represent. The overwhelming focus on electoral politics as a solution to our problems, and at the expense of equally focusing on culture, economics, education, and communications. So, okay, so what happened was going back to Mama Fannie Lou Hamer and Victoria Gray Adams and Unita Blackwell, June Johnson, all of the dynamic, Annie Devine, all of the dynamic sisters who were part of the movement in Mississippi, um, who went to the 1964 Democratic Convention and demanded seats as part of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. They were denied their seats, but they returned and decided that they wanted to try to organize, keep the Freedom Democratic Party alive and organize an independent party. Well, the regular Democratic Party, or the white-controlled Democratic Party, came to some of the members of the Freedom Democrats with let's call them trinkets or 30 pieces of silver. And unfortunately, a lot of the people who had started the party and were operating it agreed to disband the party and to merge the Freedom Democrats into the regular Democratic Party. Okay. I maintain that the entire course of Black politics in the U.S. may have been different had the Freedom Democrats maintained their independence. I mean, after all, they're in the Mississippi Delta, where Black people are the majority. You don't need, you don't have to be integrated because you're the majority in all of these counties, Sunflower County and all of these counties, Tallahatchie County, all these counties in the Mississippi Delta. You don't need that. But there were those who said that, we need to try to integrate and become part of the American system. This is the way we're going to move forward. So they decided to relinquish their independence and join the Democrats. Now, what what Kwame Ture and others decided to do at that time was, this is not going to work in Mississippi, so let's move to Alabama and try it in the Black Belt of Alabama. So you have a series of counties in central Alabama that are called the Black Belt. They extend actually all the way over to Macon County, where Tuskegee University is, and then all the way back across to Selma. And so in Lowndes County, they formed an organization called the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, and its symbol was a Black Panther. And so they decided we're going to run for local offices here, like, tax collector, sheriff, different positions, and try to seize, control of the politics, at least so that we can control, our own destiny, in this county. And they were also working in other counties, Greene County and some other counties. And so they formed what was then called the Black Panther Party. Now, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale found out about this in Oakland, and they asked if they could use the Panther symbol. And that's how the Black Panther Party that we all know about got its name and symbol. It started with the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, which had the panther as a symbol. And so they thought that their position was, let's control what we can control. And so they were majority in a lot of these small towns. There's no reason why we shouldn't control the school board, the city council, county commissioners, soil and water conservation supervisor, or whatever. But they would eventually run into the same problem that Jackson, Mississippi has now with its water, because they still have to rely on funds from the state government. And so that's why it has to be a total process. It just can't be politics. It has to be every aspect of power, which I identify 5 areas: culture, communications, economics, education, and politics. So basically, what happened was that a lot of people, as the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965, after the march from Selma to Montgomery, bloody Sunday, where the police attacked and just brutalized, John Lewis and Amelia Boynton Robinson and so many others on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. When people began to try to move into the political arena, they saw being part of the two-party system, which I call now the corrupt two-party system, as being the vehicle for political power. And obviously, if you don't have power in all of the other areas, for example, right? If we don't control the way we think and how we act, that's basically culture, and then it's enhanced by education, then essentially you're going to wind up in a situation where someone else will have the control of power, but you may be an office holder. You might be a mayor, or you might be a state legislator, or you might be someone in Congress, and all those kinds of things, but you will be part of the system. Okay. And so what it actually was, when we look at it, it was neocolonialism. The same neocolonialism that Kwame Nkrumah had written about, I think it was 1965, neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, right? And then Kwame Nkrumah had also written about a book called Class Struggle in Africa, when he realized that that there was an African bourgeoisie that was being created, and these people's allegiance was to the former colonial powers. And so neocolonialism, I say neocolonialism is the bane of Africa today, and it's really the bane of Black politics almost wherever we are. uh, the people who are holding office, whether they might be the president of a country, or they might be, the governor of a state, or the mayor of a city, or whatever, the whole apparatus is still basically being controlled, from Europe, or in the case of the United States, being controlled, by the white power, the power structure. So, that's basically what happened. The same neocolonialism that led to the overthrow of Patrice Lumumba and Kwame Nkrumah and Modibo Keita and others, the same neocolonialism was at work, within what we call Black America, the exact same thing. And so they put these people up in front of us and say, oh my God, you got a black mayor, you got a black congressman, you even got a black president. And so, you know, that became the thrust to move us away from, the idea of independent politics, and more focus on liberation, in terms of, controlling, life-sustaining and life-enhancing institutions.
And as you say, similar scenario and situation on the continent of Africa as well, where around the same time, the movement was about independence, and that independence movement got hijacked. And instead of now, moving towards independence, we started moving towards integration. And here we are, and then, even back then as well, there seemed to have been a direct attack, against our men as well. Your paper was talking about, the loss of so many jobs and high, unemployment. And that, was also directly impacting on Black families. I would imagine at one time our men would have been quite independent, but as we moved towards integration, we were, relying on them for the blue collar jobs, etc. I wonder if you can tell us a bit about that particular era as well, please, in America.
Yeah, well, what we had was, we had these young Black people, young African people, who were born in the 1940s, and they grew up in the 1950s, attending colleges in the 1960s, and they started the rebellion against American Apartheid. Okay. And they started with passive resistance. They operated with no fear, despite all of the violence. You had what we call the raw elements, like the Ku Klux Klan and the white citizens councils, and then you had the institutional elements, the local sheriffs and others, police officers who were in trying to maintain control of, of American apartheid. So as these young people were experiencing, these brutal beatings, for example, being imprisoned in, Parchman Penitentiary and various jails, Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer and was it 5, 6 other Black women returning from a voter registration conference were stopped, were arrested in Winona, Mississippi in 1963 and brutally beaten. They used Black inmates to beat, Mrs. Hamer, Uvesta Simpson, June Johnson. I can't remember the other 2 sisters. They were literally beaten. What they thought they were doing was intimidating them. And some of Mrs. Hamer's the beating she took was so brutal because once they found out who she was, then they they had one black prisoner beating her. The white uh, the prison people were holding her down, and they had these black men just pummeling her while she was laying down. And so this one guy just hit Mama Hamer so many times he got tired, and they called another guy out of a cell. And of course, the threat was, you either beat these women, or we're gonna take you out and lynch you right here behind the courthouse, castrate you and lynch you. And so these guys, they beat these sisters. The interesting thing was every one of them stayed in the struggle. They thought they were intimidating people. Every one of them stayed in the struggle. So, I mean, we had that kind of courage. But and June Johnson, I think, was only 15 years old, and she's a legend in the Mississippi Delta now, along next to Mrs. Hamer. So experiencing that brutality, that just harsh Gestapo type of oppression and repression, these young people, a lot of them became radicalized. Now others said, John Lewis and others, we're gonna make the system work. But a significant number of people went off in deeper into the Black Liberation Movement, with the Panther Party, the US organization, the Black Liberation Army, the Congress of Racial Equality, the Revolutionary Action Movement. And what happened was, by, let's say, the late 1960s, Dr. King has been killed. There were rebellions in over 300 American cities. They said, we got to do something about this. And so now part of this is a theory. You can read it in the paper I sent you. Part of this is theoretical. I can't exactly prove this, but I'm just thinking like how they would think. They said, what produced Ruby Darius Robinson and Kwame Ture and brother that was then known as H. Rap Brown, now a political prisoner, Imam Jamil El-Amin, free Imam Jamil El-Amin, wrongfully imprisoned in a federal system, even though he was convicted of a state crime on trumped up charges. They said, if we don't get a grip on this, then we are in big trouble in this country, because look at what these strong Black families have produced. So they said the Black family is the key to all of this. I mean, really, everybody knows, about Dr. King and everybody else, but it is, and I've, talked about Mrs. Hamer. Mrs. Hamer, rose, but, a lot of people never heard of people like June Johnson and Annie Devine and Victoria Gray Adams and people like. It was the strong Black families of the Deep South that made the civil rights movement possible. Without those strong Black families, the people who invested the most, the people who lost the most. And then when you travel across the Black Belt of Alabama in the 2020s, you can see that the very people who invested the most benefited the least. That's a tragedy. But the power structure said, we got to do something about these families. And so they launched a series of programs. They started with expanding the welfare state, which essentially removed, Black males, from the home. And so let me just go back for a minute. Okay, technically under chattel slavery, you really couldn't have a family, even though the one thing that stayed, despite our culture just being shattered in one swoop, one of the things that stayed, I mean, we separated from the land, we wearing other people's raggedy clothes, we eating other people's food, we can't practice our, spiritual beliefs and whatnot. But the one idea here in the United States, The one idea through the 246 years of chattel slavery that never left was the sense of family. And you have stories, for example, of a mother or a wife in Virginia walking to Alabama because that she knew that her husband and her sons were sold into chattel slavery in Alabama, walking from Virginia to Alabama, right? My daughter went to school in Alabama, and we drive down there, and it's like 5 hours or whatever, right? Walking. You know, a a man looking for his wife in Kentucky, walking to Mississippi. Okay, the sense of family. And so what happened was that by 1900, okay, chattel slavery ends with the 13th Amendment for all conditions except one, and that one is the one that they're still using right now, and that is, what they're doing with the economics in the prison industrial complex. Nine out of 10 black children, 90% of black children by 1900 were being raised in a two-parent family, which was often extended. Now, the extended family, of course, comes straight out of where? West Africa, right? I mean, in my home, my grandmother and my great grandmother were in the home that I grew up in. Okay, the extended family. That's that concept. So you have 90% in 1900. You have 90%. Okay, so now in the 1960s, when I'm growing up, as a result of the Great Migration and several other factors, the percentage of black children being raised in a two-parent family, it was down to 75%. Lord, what would we give to have that today? What would we give to have that 75% today? But so part of what happened was, this is a theory on my part. I believe the United States government contrived to destroy the black family. Okay, first we're going to expand the welfare state. We're going to pay these women for, they can have as many children as they want, and we'll just give them more, food stamps or whatever. Okay, but no male can be in the home. Then you had the erosion of the United States blue collar manufacturing base, which was one of the major in the urban centers. Now, not in the rural parts of this country, but in the major urban centers. Here I'm talking about Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Milwaukee, St. Louis, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Baltimore, places like that. Black men were heavily employed in manufacturing jobs. A lot of those jobs were unionized. These guys were making good money. They could keep their families together, and they could either send their children to college, or if the child wanted to come work in a steel mill or a tire factory or an automobile plant, they would go to the union boss and say, "Look, man, my son's coming out of high school. Can you bring him on for a summer apprenticeship and just, try to, get him, working here on the assembly line?" Productivity. So for whatever reason, and I'm not saying that they did this specifically because of black men, because now this is what Trump's MAGA Americans are all bent out of shape about, because initially they started closing these factories down in places like Gary, Indiana. That was Obama's first job. He was supposed to be a community organizer. And what he was supposed to be doing was, they closed the steel mill in Gary. All these black men who worked in Gary, but they lived in Chicago, now they're out of work. So their families are suffering. And Obama's job was to assist them. Well, he decided that was, that wasn't going to get him where he wanted to go. So he went back to law school. But anyway, so black men are being removed from the labor force. The next thing was the massive introduction of drugs. Now, people who've seen The Godfather Part 1, saw the meeting where they were talking about, we're going to bring the drugs in and keep it in the black community. That's actual facts. That is actual facts. And, they even decided they would create some quote unquote black godfathers, like, Bumpy Johnson and Frank Lucas and others, let them make money. So So the war on drugs. So now you got people out of work. You got broken homes, and they're flooding the community with drugs. Well, what's going to happen? Self-destruction. Now, as bad as we thought the flow of heroin was in the 1960s and 70s, then Ronald Reagan and crew, Oliver North, with the Iran-Contra, came up with this idea of flooding the black community with crack cocaine in the 1980s and 1990s. And we had a massive explosion in crime and violence, young black males being killed. And so all of these things, I'm not going to say that they sat down and planned, everything out. But if you look at the goals of COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, that was the other thing. Before I get to that, so you had those three factors: the expansion of the welfare state, the dislocation of black men from the labor force, uh, the introduction of drugs, which then led to a war on drugs. They said, well, we're gonna let you sell the drugs, but then we're gonna lock you up and put you in jail. Okay, and so that started the process of mass racial incarceration that Professor Michelle Alexander talks about. The other thing was, and this was critically important, was the FBI's war on the Black Liberation Movement. People ask me all the time, what happened to the Black Liberation Movement? Well, we lost the war to the United States government. I mean, so did a lot of other countries lost wars to the United States government. The United States government in 1967 decided to declare war on the Black Liberation Movement. And they said the first thing we got to do is we got to eliminate these leaders. Well, they had actually already started in 1965. I know black men killed Malcolm X, but in February of 1965. But in August of 1964, J. Edgar Hoover sent out an FBI directive that said, do something about Malcolm X. Okay? And the killing of Malcolm X wasn't just a crime against Malcolm, and the Shabazz family, his wife Betty Shabazz and their daughters. It was a crime against the whole African world. Okay? And then and it's interesting. The whole time, Malcolm is going around talking about, white people are devils and all this kind of stuff. Well, he's not that much of a threat. Now he's talking about unifying, people in Ghana with people in Mississippi. Now you become a problem. Same with Dr. King. Dr. King wasn't a problem until he made the connection between the war in Vietnam and poverty in the United States. And the same thing is going on right now. The United States government, every member of the Congressional Black Caucus, every Democrat in the United States Congress has voted to send $174 billion to a stupid war in Ukraine. Dr. King said, I was increasingly compelled to see the war as an enemy of the poor and attack it as such. Now, Dr. King, you becoming a threat because now you threatening the profits of the military-industrial complex. And so that was the war. And so leader Fred Hampton, assassinated in his sleep, right? Bunchy Carter gunned down at UCLA. Geronimo G. Jaga Pratt imprisoned on trumped-up charges for over 25 years. Assata Shakur, right? Arrested, shot on the New Jersey Turnpike. Some revolutionaries, white and black revolutionaries, liberated her, and she managed to escape to Cuba. But what's going on is that you have the loss of all of that leadership. No one can fight a war without. You got to have generals. You got to have foot soldiers, but you got to have generals, and you got to have people that are able, to direct the massive energy into a positive action. Okay, and so I mean, okay, so what if the Germans had killed Eisenhower and Montgomery and de Gaulle? And well, what would happen? Wiped out a whole slew of Allied commanders. I mean, what would have happened? This is what I'm saying. So that was the other factor. The the war on the Black Liberation Movement. It was an actual war. Okay, I mean, I was helping a brother who had to go to prison. Cleve Sellers had to go to prison for the Orangeburg massacre. Okay, the students at South Carolina State in Orangeburg were protesting a segregated bowling alley. State troopers or National Guards, I can't remember which, fired on these students on the campus of South Carolina State and killed 3 young black male students. Cleve, who had been like in the leadership of SNCC, was back in South Carolina in his home area working still. This is in 1968. The troopers killed 3 black students and they arrest Cleve for inciting a riot. And so he had to go to prison about they kept appealing and finally they turned his appeals down. He wound up going to prison. He wanted me to help his family. I got a job driving cabs to help his family. And one day I get called in. The taxi inspector calls me in. I'm trying to think now, what rule did I violate? Did I take somebody to a liquor house? Did I give a ride to, maybe, a person of ill repute or something? I'm trying to think, what did I do? I can't think of anything I've done. I get in there. I said, what's the problem? He said, oh, there's no problem. These 2 men want to talk to you. One guy from the FBI and one guy from the Greensboro Police Intelligence. I'm like, I'm 21, 22, something like that. So these guys take me into this office. They read my life history to me.
Wow.
They read this is in 1973. Now, this is before all the stuff they got now. They read oh, you were such a good student at West Charlotte High School. You were going to Morehouse. Why'd you get caught up in all? Well, what they have 2 angles. The first angle is intimidation. And then the second angle is, are you for sale? Okay. And I basically told them to go, where, it's burning. I mean, if you're gonna lock me up, lock me up. But see, when I got into the Pan-African part of the Black Liberation Movement, and we started studying Kwame Nkrumah. Now, when I was in the Black Panther Party, everybody had to read Chairman Mao Zedong's Red Book, the Little Red Book. We had to read that. Okay. When I got in the Black Liberation Movement, Kwame Nkrumah has a little book. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not. It's called The Axioms of Kwame Nkrumah. It's like a pocket book. Kwame Nkrumah's first axiom says, the secret to life is to have no fear. When I got deep into the struggle, that became my mantra. No fear. And so it's when you are staring your enemies in the face and they can see that you're not afraid, that changes the dynamics. So I said, I'm not helping you do anything. For as you're concerned, I know nothing. But they said, well, they'd already, we know you're going around giving speeches, you're doing this, all this kind of stuff. They try to butter you up on one hand, make you think. But I'm sitting there thinking like, I'm really just a foot soldier, and these guys got all this information on me. I'm not Huey Newton. I'm not Angela Davis. I'm not Kathleen Cleaver. I'm not Kwame Ture, but they got all this on me. Wow. That just goes to show when it comes to us, they leave nothing unturned. Nope. I guarantee you this. Let's say we still operating in 2001. If 19 of us were trying to learn how to fly airplanes, especially jumbo jets, man, we never would have got off the ground because we are in their focus. But these other people can do that, and they wind up crashing into buildings, right? I mean, they didn't crash into all of them. Everybody still, how did the World Trade Center #7 fall? But anyway, I'm just saying that when we look at our history, and so really and truly, if you want to say, let's go back to the Songhai Empire. Since the fall of the Songhai Empire, right, and we know that that there was the war with Morocco. Morocco was supported by was it Elizabeth I? And they had some of the Moors who had come out of Spain were still around. So they invaded the Songhai Empire because they wanted the gold and the salt, right? Since the fall of the Songhai Empire, this would have been in the 1590s, our organizations, our countries, and our leaders with the most potential have been taken out of their development. I mean, look at how old some of these people are. I mean, Biden, he finally, crapped out, but I mean, look how young Garvey, Dr. King and Malcolm were 39 when they were kids. Fred Hampton was 21. I think Bunchy was 23 or 24. I mean, you think about all of that potential, right? All of that potential. But there are lessons for us to learn, from all of those experiences. And one is, that you need a decentralized leadership. This whole charismatic leader kind of thing, that just doesn't work. You look on the African continent, and I'm very concerned now about the alliance of Sahel states, the leaders there, Traoré, Ibrahim Traoré, and the others, because we saw that they overthrew Lumumba, okay, and that set off a series of removals of leaders. Kwame Nkrumah was removed in 1966. Modibo Keita is removed from the presidency of Mali in 1968. They tried numerous times to remove Sékou Touré. Assassination attempts, all kinds of things. I'll never forget there was a Portugal, because Sékou Touré was allowing Cabral and PAIGC to use Guinea as a base to liberate Guinea-Bissau. And so the Portuguese, with some black traders, like Moise Tshombe and Joseph Mobutu. I don't call him by the name. He tried to claim an African name. I don't deal with that. Jonas Savimbi, these kind of people, right? Papa Doc Duvalier, race traders, 100% race traders. They tried to invade Guinea in 1970. Now, Kwame Nkrumah was living in, Sékou Touré made him the co-president of Guinea after he was overthrown in Ghana. Sékou Touré said, you the co-president. Just like I'm the president, I'm a co-president, you're a co-president. So they invaded Conakry. Sékou Touré had learned from Fidel Castro that in addition to an army, you need a people's militia, right? So we know about the people's militia, the Bay of Pigs, how they turned back the invasion and whatnot in Cuba. And so when the Portuguese were like marching on the presidential headquarters where Sékou Touré was living, people came out with their AK-47s. They ran them back into the ocean. And then they hung them and left them hanging from bridges for a couple of days and said, this is what happens to race traders. Okay. But Kwame Nkrumah didn't have that kind of support. In fact, it was the army, right, with money from the CIA that overthrew him. Okay. And so we look at all of these, succession of coups and whatnot. And it's not what we saw in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. I call it people's activity. Yeah, they can call it a coup all they want to. The people were removing neocolonial leaders. But there's a need. I'm glad they formed this alliance, and I hope that that some other states, will join them, because we have to protect these countries and leaders and organizations that are moving our people towards self-reliance, because based on the history, we saw what happened to Garvey. Okay, we saw what happened to Garvey, and so we can't have everything invested in one person. And number two, when whoever's in the leadership should be decentralized, but we have to have the capacity to protect our people. So I know I said a lot there, Sister Shanice.
It's been incredible listening to the story. I mean, it's just so much knowledge there that you're sharing. We're learning so much from you. But as you say, it's so important for our people to know all of this history and to learn from this history, because history has a tendency to repeat itself. So all of us are just holding our breath and hoping that those three nations, the Sahel nations, have actually put good protection in place to protect their leaders, that there are, numerous doubles walking around, and, that they've got all of their intelligence operating sufficiently, because today the technology that they've got and the ability that they've got to take people out, they don't even have to be in the country anymore. They can do it from space.
They can
They
do
can
it from
press
space.
from behind a desk now, as we saw, and blow up cars. And it's just criminal what these people have done to us, over the centuries. And then we've just been looking at the last 6 decades or so, the extent of the massacres, the coups, the assassinations, the false charges that have led to imprisonment, the beatings. It's unbelievable. I mean, when we just don't retaliate in that same way either. Our people back then were so courageous, so fearless. They were just prepared to accept whatever came their way, and it's the extent of the humanity that we have as a people, I think, is our downfall, really, because, our enemies don't have any humanity. They will skin you alive over dinner, it's unbelievable. I mean, there's a case in South Africa right now, just to sidetrack for a minute, where a farmer murdered 2 Black women and fed their bodies to pigs. They're in court right now. Him and his 2 employees are in court right now. Murdered the women. 2 women and her husband, one of them's husband, went into the farm because they heard that this farm was discarding dairy products. And they were obviously hungry and in need of food. This farm was discarding dairy products and feeding it to their pigs. So they went to try and get some of this discarded dairy products and got shot and murdered in the process. The husband managed to flee. He got shot, but he managed to get away, and he was the one that raised the alarm. By the time the people had come to find the 2 women, the pigs had eaten them. And so, that is the extent of the gruesomeness, that these people are prepared to go to. And we're just not inhumane in that way. And I don't know, how we beat, an enemy who's just so evil, and of course, as well as like the FBI and the like, you talk about the media assaults as well, on the consciousness of our people, and how they deliberately use the media, to shift the mind of our people from the, consciousness of liberation to materialism.
Yes.
And so, wow. So, you talked about how they've taken you believe it was a direct strategy of theirs to destroy the Black family.
Oh,
We talk
absolutely.
about that in the UK as well. We've seen a similar strategy in the UK where the welfare system was actually used to remove the man from the home. So it's like the woman has a child with her husband or a partner. And it's like, well, if he's not in the home, you can get all this extra money, you can get all this extra support from the system, but he's not allowed to be in the home. At the time, obviously, we didn't realize and understand what was going on. And then, the men, they don't give them any jobs to, reduce their capacity to be able to be the man of the home. And, they were just making the man feel as the only alternative he's got is to go out and sell drugs. And it was all part of their strategy so they can lock up our men in their prisons and destroy our communities, weaken our communities. They did the same thing, flooded our community with drugs as well after the uprisings that we had in the 80s, nowhere near the scale that you had in America. But, we did have our protests here in the UK, and we saw similar things happening. The removal of the men from out the family, the removal of children out the families as well. We've got a social services system here that comes in the home, giving an opportunity to remove the children and put the children in care where they're abused and where, grown up outside of their culture and without knowledge of who they are, etc. And they become an enemy of the community that they were originally from. So it's no coincidence that what you experienced in the USA, is so similar to the strategies that are being put in place in the UK. So I think you're right in your analysis in that it was definitely, part of a deliberate strategy to destroy our communities. Same thing, the drugs, the welfare state, the high levels of unemployment, the media, the mass use of the media as well, to create this illusion to our men that they can get rich, being a drug dealer and what have you. All very much the same. That was the only door that was left open for them. And we're still feeling the assault of the media today as well. So we've got this situation now where, those strong Black families that you spoke of, where you had the mother, the father, the grandma, the grandpa, the extended family, where you had, we had, the support within the families now decimated, which, I suppose got in the way of the next generation continuing with the liberation struggle. And then in its place, they put all these Black bourgeoisies and were holding them up as the ones that our communities needed to emulate. I mean, you've got some big names out there when it comes to Black bourgeoisies, the Jesse Jacksons and the, what's the
Sharpton.
Al Sharpton and the likes. They came in as the liberators, the ones who are now integrated. And it's like, this is the way to go, folks. Join our parties. What do you have to say about that movement of the likes of Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson in terms of the shift now away from independent Black movement and the liberation for independence now towards integration?
Well, okay, so, I told you that we spent the year organizing the African Liberation Day that, had 35 to 40,000 in DC. But when we total up the other numbers from Toronto, San Francisco, and the Caribbean, we estimate that as many as 50,000. Now, that's not, that number pales in comparison to the Million Man March, but that was a march. The African Liberation Day in May of '72 was a march that was made by the movement. Okay, and so there's a big with specific objectives, and so at the same time we were organizing that, we were organizing the National Black Political Convention, which took place in Gary, Indiana, in March of 1972. Okay. And produced a beautiful document called the National Black Political Agenda. I wasn't thinking about it. I could have brought the booklet so you could see it. The thrust of the people that were in my part of the movement was, we're going to use this to rekindle the spirit of independent Black politics. And we're going to start from the ground up. I don't know what kind of additional parties you all have in the UK. I see the left has done quite well, in France, and it looks like the right has done well in Germany. But the model is to build from the ground up, not from the top down. And so that was the thought process of the people that, had similar thoughts or worldviews as mine. And you had another group of people who saw this as an opportunity to become part of the power structure, part of the corrupt two-party system. And so in the process of engagement, they were the ones who won out, particularly as a lot of our leadership was removed from the scene or whatever. But the neocolonialists, people who feed at the trough of North Atlantic imperialism and capitalist exploitation, and whatnot. They were the ones who won out because the system made sure that they were funded. The system made sure that they were funded to carry out their programs.
Mm.
Whereas we had to like, struggle, like to collect nickels and dimes and dollars, and they were getting,
Mm.
grants for millions of dollars, for example, or, getting, paydays from, corporations and whatnot. So, that was part of what happened there because I mean we had this black convention in Gary, Indiana. And I mean, if you read the document, you would say, wow, they produced that kind of consciousness.
Mm.
But once again, you had, see, I'm just a young guy, but I said later on for forming a united front with these integrationists. Let's form a united front of Pan-Africanists or Black nationalists. But the older guys, the leaders, they said, no, we want to pull all these guys in. We can influence them. No. Same mistake Kwame Nkrumah made with Selassie. He thought, well, once we get to OAU, it'll become an African Liberation Organization, and it became a neocolonial organization. They might have been better off keeping the Casablanca group or what. But you know, so so but the point I want to make before I lose my train of thought is that as bad as we thought these neocolonial functionaries were, we were totally unprepared for the comings of people like Barack Obama,
Mhm.
right? We'd already seen the black face of U.S. imperialism represented by Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice,
Mhm.
but Obama was just a whole different phenomena. Fred Hampton, such a brilliant young man. Fred Hampton was giving a speech one time, and at that time, Richard Nixon, the president, was running this program called Black Capitalism. And he was saying, we're going to get these businesses and they're going to start these capitalist enterprises in the black community. And that's how the black community is going to be uplifted. And so, Fred Hampton said, no, what will happen is you'll have a bourgeois class of people uplifted, and the masses of people will be in the same position. But he was talking about education. And he said without education or political education, as he called it, and others, we all called it at the time, political education. He said, without political education, you will have people being duped into participating in these programs, right? So you'll have black capitalists. And then this was so you're talking about being able to see into the future, right? He said, and before you know it, you'll have black imperialists. Now Fred Hampton is saying this in 1969.
Look at Africa now.
And what did we get with Barack Obama? And what would we have if Harris were to
Yeah,
win,
yeah.
right? I mean, we see the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas Greenfield, a black woman, up there vetoing every measure that could have possibly stopped this slaughter in Gaza 2, 3 months into it, because the progressive countries on the Security Council were putting forth these resolutions calling for a ceasefire, in the United States, with a black hand being raised, boom. And so as bad as we thought the Sharptons of the world were, what we have now, because they have allowed these people, they know that they can trust them, that they're going to carry on the mission. What we have now is much worse, because these guys have, at least symbolically, and they do have the capacity to make decisions like Obama's decision, to invade Libya, and participate in the murder of Muammar Gaddafi. what we have with that group of people, like the black leader of the Democratic Party in the Congress, Hakeem Jeffries, what we have there is black people actually carrying out the mission
Mm.
of U.S. imperialism.
Mm.
And they are being projected as to young people, look what you can be, look what you can accomplish. And you can be a Zionist and commit genocide. So we are in, let me explain it to you like this, Sister Shanice. So when I'm growing up, there was very little competition for my mind.
Mm.
Okay. There was very little competition. The white power structure believed that they just had total control over us. And so they weren't worried about too much. Like College Woodson said, if you can control a person's thinking, you don't have to worry about their actions. They really weren't that worried. They weren't that worried about it. So there was very little competition. Okay. So the children of the 1940s, the Kwame Ture's and the Angela Davises and Ruby Doris Robinsons and the Sada Shakurs, no, they changed that. They say, oh no, 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 no. We can't leave that to chance. And so Bobby Wright, the great psychologist, Dr. Bobby Wright, died way too young. He said in it's late 1970s, 1980s, there's only one battle left, the battle for the black mind. And we are losing. That's what he said in the 1980s. And so now you have, when Du Bois wrote The Souls of Black Folks, he talked about Black Americans, African Americans having a double consciousness, one American, one Negro. You could say one European, one African, right? And now that double consciousness could be a quadruple consciousness because we have a lot of people that have more allegiance to class. Then you have a lot of our sisters got sucked up into white feminism, which we separate from the womanism that Dr. Valethia Watkins Beatty at Howard talks about, that where the black woman is like Queen Tayi sitting beside Amenhotep III, right? Co-regent with power, okay? And so there's a massive struggle for clarity of thought versus confusion that we get from the celebrity distraction class. Okay. And so that's the other part that makes, our struggle more difficult. I always use this example, studying Nile Valley civilizations. I consider Narmer, first king of ancient Kemet, to be the most important person in African history because Narmer had a vision. Narmer's vision was to unify the two lands into one country, right? You had Upper Kemet, Lower Kemet, and we know from the DNA studies that that you had a vast admixture of people from various ethnic groups that had traveled, down the White Nile and the Blue Nile and settled in the Nile Valley. Narmer was able, now think about this, when we look at the DRC right now, the Eastern DRC right now, or we look at Rwanda in 1994, think about what Narmer accomplished. Narmer was able to get people to submerge, not to eliminate, to submerge their ethnicities to become the people of one people of a nation, ancient Kemet. Okay. And so the Narmer model, I mean, and a lot of this, the ethnicity is convoluted by colonialism and, North Atlantic imperialism, like we saw with the war between the Ethiopian federal government and the TPLF, in what was it, 2020 in Ethiopia. And we thought that once that situation was resolved, with the Lady Pandor and Uhuru Kenyatta and the others that brought these groups together in South Africa and said stop fighting. The fighting stopped, and then now you still have a conflict. Ethiopia, a country with unlimited potential, is bogged down in a conflict because there are ethnic groups, the Oromo Liberation Front, and then you have the Fano in the Amhara region, in which, I mean, Fano helped Abiy Ahmed force the Tigray people to the table, and then he said all militias have to disarm, and they rebelled against it. But all I'm just saying is that Sudan, okay, look at the catastrophe that's taking place there, the ongoing catastrophe in the eastern DRC. There's an ethnic component, and we have got to figure out a way to overcome that ethnic component. I'm not saying that the Hausa people, Fulani people, I'm not saying no, you have rich histories. I'm not saying that. But first and foremost, we are African people.
Shame. Mm-hmm.
First and foremost. First and foremost. So that's where I know we started off talking about Sharpton Jackson and all these, but went to Obama and all that. But the struggle is and it's a massive struggle because there's so much competition for these young black minds. These kids are on social media, they're all over the place, TikTok, this, that, and the other. And whereas with me, I mean, it was like, boom, this is what's going on. What's going on? What my mind is totally focused on the Black Liberation Movement. I wanted to be part of it when I was like 15, 16 years old, right? So that's part of the struggle. And it's an enormous piece of it. But I see a ray of hope. I see a ray of hope with the young people protesting in Kenya, brutally killed. What was it? Was it many 60 some odd killed? The brutal repression, young people protesting in Nigeria, right? Okay. And then we see the success stories in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, despite the fact that the terrorists, obviously armed by some foreign forces, are still, wreaking a lot of havoc. Senegal, Faye, I'm not sure which way that's going, but young people put him in. Obviously he was he had to run because they wouldn't allow Sonko to run. But I do see some hope there, okay? And with our young people, with young African people are the most important mass, the most important demographic on the planet. Because first of all, because of just raw numbers, right? That the median age, the average age in Africa is like something like what, 19 or something somewhere in that neighborhood, and when you look at Europe and the United States, you see dying populations. More white people are dying that are being born in the United States. And you look at the birth rates, particularly in those Eastern European countries. This was the amazing thing about this war in Ukraine. You ain't got no people. You don't have enough people to reproduce to keep your country going, and then you fight a stupid war. But once again, they were gonna sign a peace treaty in March, or was it March or April of 2022, and Boris Johnson flew over there and told them, Biden told Johnson to go over there and tell them, no, we're going to fund them with everything they need to beat Russia. And so now you've had hundreds of thousands of people killed and whatnot. And so what's going to happen is that, and the Chinese will probably be the first to do this because they, that the two-child policy is now catching up with them. Japan is an extremely old society. Who's going to do the work? See? And so they're gonna try to take all of these young, they're gonna try to take a lot of these young African people to these countries to do the work. And that's why we need to make sure we're building up, the economies so that we can keep all of these brilliant, young African minds, courageous, on our continent.
In Africa. Wow. Wow, what a phenomenal journey we've been on with you. We are 10 minutes away from the top of the hour. Can you believe that, my brother,
Oh,
Makheru?
time time flies when you spread knowledge.
It certainly does. And thank you, everyone in the chat, for sticking with us. Let's see if we've got any questions or any points to raise. Mondele is asking, how about Farrakhan? Is he a bourgeoisie?
Is he, well,
Yeah, but you mentioned the Million Man March. I mean, many of us were disappointed at the outcome of that. It was like, or else, what was it? It was there was uh what was the aim? What was the purpose of that Million Man March apart from having a million men turn up? It doesn't seem to have gone anywhere. So Farrakhan clearly can, bring the masses together. But for what purpose? Am I missing something?
see, I gave you the example of African Liberation Day. See, African Liberation Day was a product of the Black Liberation Movement. Our African Liberation Day in May of 72, we also had one in 73 and 74. But we didn't never reach the numbers that we did in 72, but nevertheless, we still had them.
Mhm.
The Million Man March was not a product of a movement. It was Minister Farrakhan's idea. And uh, it's one thing to set a mass of energy in motion. It's something different to be able to sustain the momentum of that mass of energy by directing it in the positive action.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, and so that's where because the leaders didn't have a vision of what to do next.
Mhm.
Because the march was made. I was part of the local organizing committee. We had all across the United States, they had local organizing committees. And these were really like united fronts because we had Christian preachers and, we had, people like me who, tendency towards spirituality and everybody was participating in it. And so and so you had the foundation. All you need to do is direct us into something. Don't make it complicated. Don't say, well, we're gonna fight for reparations. Don't make it complicated. Let's take something, let's make it something real simple. We're gonna clean up our music. The B word and the N word gotta go.
Mhm. Mhm.
This gotta go. You're not going to talk about our mothers and our grandmothers and our aunts and our sisters and our wives and our lovers. That's out.
Mhm.
And the N word is out because that is a product of the white. That was the way the white supremacy dynamic, the Thomas Jeffersons and these people. That's the way we were disconnected from our history. Like uh, Malcolm said, this is Malcolm or Maulana Karenga said that a Negro is a non-historical being, and once you disconnect people from their history, then you can disconnect them from humanity, okay, and say that they're not humans or whatever, okay. So we had we had an opportunity there by
Mhm.
just give us some simple instructions.
Mhm.
No instructions ever came. What they did was they went out and tried to form another top-down organization called the National African American Leadership Summit, NAALS, NALS, because they wanted to bring in the NAACP and the Urban League, and these people were scared to get into March. Once they saw what happened, then they said, well, maybe, we were wrong. We want to be part of it. And so instead of taking the grassroots, people like me, whatever, but see, I was already an activist. Whatever happened with the march, I was going to continue my activism. What we lost was all the people who joined something for the first time. And I recruited a lot of people, and they said, what do we did? What do we go up there for? What are we doing now? What are we doing now? And I'm saying we got to try to keep our organization together. And and some LOCs did stay together, for years afterwards. But they became, separate fingers rather than a closed fist. So that was lost. But why was it lost? Because there was a lack of activist vision of what to do next. You can set a massive energy in motion. It was a tremendous massive energy. But that massive energy has to be directed into positive action. And I call the Million Man March out here in the US our third lost opportunity of the 20th century. Okay. The first lost opportunity was the demise of the Garvey movement, but we know the Garvey movement came under assault by the United States government. Okay. The second lost opportunity was the Black Liberation Movement. The Black Liberation Movement came under assault by the U.S. government. The Million Man March, the lost opportunity was virtually self-imposed. But it was a tremendous lost opportunity. I'm not, look, the organization is an autocratic organization, and so I mean that's the way things run there when you have just one person in charge. But at the local level, I work with a lot of people in the nation on various things, and at the local level, it's different from what you see at the top.
Okay. Well, we are 3 minutes away from the top of the hour. I can't even go into that any further. So let's see who we've got in the chat. Lots of comments in the chat. Apologies for not bringing in more of your comments, but as you've been hearing this from the history that we've been learning about America after the Civil Rights Movement, it's just been such a fascinating insight into what's been going on. So, but there's been lots of conversations going on in the chat. What's this one? There is no tribal problem in Africa, as the concept of tribe is Caucasian. There is a mixture of blood causing differences in culture, spirituality. One culture also exogenous and not anchored to our, and then it tells off there. Maybe to our liberation, earliest, not to our earliest traditions. Spirituality is the traditions of the early people of the Katoga and the Mobutu Baka. The Fulanis and Tutsis, etc., do not share this spirituality, as they have splintered traditions. So you're saying it's not just a tribal, it kind of complicates things even more for me, but it's about spirituality, traditions, and culture. Yeah. So all of these different...
You know what? And I don't use the word tribal. I don't use the word tribal, okay?
Yeah. So we should be celebrating. It's being used to divide us instead of, uniting us as a glorious, glorious people. Well, I must say, my brother Makheru, I want to thank you so, so much for joining us today. It's like 2 minutes away from the top of the hour, and I think we could go for another hour, to be honest. But if you'll accept, I most certainly would love to invite you back again to continue to share the wealth of knowledge that you have with this generation. Someone said to me in the chat, I saw somewhere, young people are here. I got a shout out. So to all the young people that are listening, that are in the house, I hope you've been absorbing what our brother has been sharing with us about the history. Kevin, aka Mr. says, don't forget the removal of Pan-Africanist Milton Obote of Uganda by Idi Amin, who was backed by British imperialists. Yes, there's so many of those incidences on the continent, and look at the bourgeoisies that we've got now on the continent. Look at the imperialist leaders that we've got now that are doing the bidding of their masters. So, all being well, family, we will have our brother back. Will you come back and join us again in the not too distant future, my brother?
I'll be glad, Sister Shanice. Really just a tremendous honor. And I listened to the show, and you're doing a fantastic job of raising the consciousness of our people. Fantastic.
Thank you so, so much. We're here every Wednesday, same time. We have a beautiful, dedicated audience, and they take the messages that they hear out into their communities and across their social media platforms. And so, to everyone in the audience, we're so grateful for the support that you give to this platform, and we're so grateful to you as well, my brother Makheru, for joining us today. So, family, all being well, next strong, we've got a panel discussion. We've got the return of Dr. Abu, Sister Sheila, and Sister Win for a panel debate. So don't miss that one. Keep it locked to the Sister Shanice Show platform. Thank you once again, my brother Makheru. Asante Sana.
Asante sana, Bibi Fahodie.
Odabo. Bye, family. One love. Okay, gotta log out of here now. And all being well, we'll be back next strong.